I think my process now is definitely a lot looser than it used to be. And I think that, especially as a performer, has helped me grow so much because I'm finding these new things that I'm doing every time I get on stage. And it's really interesting, like when my friends will come to my shows and they know my material so well because they've seen me do it so many times. But then when they come and now they are like seeing me do it in front of different people, they're like, oh, like you did this really great new thing on this bit. Like I hadn't seen that before. And I think that those moments are happening way more than they used to. Incredible self-realization of a path, right? Like I saw the yellow brick road in a way and I was like, oh, like I have something that I can follow. And to me, following that thing was like pursuing something that I was genuinely so passionate about.
Welcome back to another episode of Woven Wings Live, where we bring you wisdom and tools for vibrant living. I'm Gabe Crane. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Rahul Deedwania. And if you enjoy listening to us, please share our work with a friend, leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow along our journey by joining our newsletter or following us on YouTube. All those links are linked in the show description if you're not already watching us on YouTube as is. Today, we are going to get a little funny, little silly. Very stoked that we have Max Weiner, who is a comedian living in New York, joining us today to talk about his creative process, the world of comedy, and, of course, as it relates to the themes of our show, how that relates to vibrant living, to being healthy, happy, and having the life that you want to have. Max, we're going to get to meet him in a minute, but he is all over social media. You can follow him at the very nice handle, Max is a Wiener. That is Wiener. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever you're doing. On that note, Rahul, it's great to be making another episode with you, man. Here we are at the end of the year, season 3, rolling along. And how are you feeling about chatting about stand-up today? What's your own stand-up routine? Did you prep any one-liners for me?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's crazy that it's the end of the year. I think that's been a dominant feeling for me these days, and just excited to close out the year with an episode like this one. And no, do not have any stand up prepped, but I will say I am an avid consumer of comedy. And so very excited to look at it from a different lens, and I think, like you said at the outset, Gabe, it's like, for us, our show is always about coming back to how we live more conscious, more aware, more vibrant lives. And I think anything, can be a medium for us to access that. And I think today to be looking at that through the lens of comedy or the journey of becoming a comedian, that's just a inherently fun angle, I think. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation with Max.
Nice. Well, I will say that, so my 7th grade English teacher, I think, she had us do that exercise where you write a letter to yourself and then, but it's supposed to be mailed in like a time capsule, like 10, 15 years later. So she actually did it. I think I don't remember, maybe 20 years after the fact or something. So a few years ago, I get a letter from her, and inside is this letter from me, little shit me, 12-year-old self of Gabe. And his thing is, hey, did you become a stand-up comic? That's what you wanted to do. Like, are you working on your routine? That's funny. I received that a few years ago, and it's like, I always, like, I'm stoked to talk to Max because this is like kind of my aspiration or dream. Like, I've actually been talking about maybe getting up and bombing somewhere at some open mic here on Maui. And so I'm excited to kind of pick Max's ear about that and kind of like, getting over the hump of actually doing something like stand up. But there's many different dimensions, I think, of stand-up comedy that we're going to get to explore here today, especially as it relates to the inner dimension of life, sense of personal growth and personal improvement. And I think Max could have a lot to share on all of that. So before going further, I do want to bring Max onto the show. Again, Max Weiner. Max is a Wiener on social media. That's Wiener. Again, a 24-year-old comedian hailing from New York. And Max, thanks for joining us on Woven Wings Live and being down to share your experiences and wisdom with us. and maybe some jokes, I hope.
Oh, please, please. I'm chock full of nuts right now. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to talking about it. I think that every different comedian has every different kind of perspective on it, and I think that I'm just here to rub 2 cents together, and we'll see what comes of it. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
So one of the things, just to start us off, I noticed from, you and Raul had a little chat before the show, and you're talking about like how talking in front of the crowd is a form of therapy, that somehow you're like processing months of therapy just happens to be in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Can you bring us into that a little bit, maybe as a starting point? Like, how is your stand up personally valuable to you, and how does it move you when you're doing all of that?
Yeah, I think that it could be definitely a crazy thing to hear that stand up comedy is therapy, because I think that to a lot of people, getting up in front of a crowd and doing any sort of speaking is a genuine fear. Jerry Seinfeld has a really funny joke about how the getting up in front of a crowd is like the second biggest fear that people have after dying. People like would rather be in the casket than be the one giving the eulogy, something like that. I definitely fucked it up, but like, yeah, and it's definitely a little nerve wracking, but I think that when you distill it to what it is, especially for me, and I realized this pretty early on when I started doing it, I think that it was a way for me to express my voice. And I think that a lot of me figuring out who I was as a person came on stage, whether it be even doing theater in high school and in college and doing improv comedy and doing stand up. I think that it triggers a different kind of response in your body when you have to get up in front of people and entertain them. And I think that stand up comedy is completely different because you're essentially trying to get your thoughts validated by a group of strangers. And so it's like a really narcissistic form of therapy in a way, because it's like you want to be validated, but you also want to feel like you're better than everyone. And so maybe, I don't know, is it the best form of therapy I could have done? I don't know. I'm in therapy right now. That works. But then I get on stage and I'm like, please laugh at this lesbian joke. And then when it doesn't work, I'm like, all right, well, now I guess it's another 10 years I got to spend with Dr. Jill. So I I go back and forth on it, but at the end of the day, I realize like, oh, what a valuable trait that I have. What a valuable experience I get to have, that A, it's something that I feel like I can do, and B, it's something that I can look at from a different lens and be like, not only is this what I want to do with my life, but it's also something that I can really see even, years down the line. I can see benefits forming from it already, where I feel like even in a 5 minute set I can do at an open mic, I'm like, wow, like it's very interesting how I learn how to react to like spontaneous changes in given situation, or a slight change in surrounding, like not getting too comfortable in something. And it's very interesting. And then it never is the same, and it's always changing. And you chase the thrill, you chase that high of getting a laugh, because there truly is nothing like it.
Yeah, I think, what you said earlier, Max, around it gives you an opportunity to express yourself, to find your voice. To me, there's something there just about art in general, right? Where
Yeah.
it's expressive in nature, and it's
Yeah.
really about getting in touch with something more than just our thoughts, right? It's something deeper than that. But I think what you started to paint the picture of is what's actually unique about stand up. And I think where you were just going right now, to me, also had shades of improv. It's like, yes, you do have your material, but you're also adjusting to the, you said, to the feedback in the moment, to the slight differences that are present, right, in each of the different, anytime you might go up and perform, and you get all of that even in a few minutes. And so I'd love to go a little bit deeper into that with you. Like,
Yeah.
take us into the experience of doing a 5 minute set, right? And you come in, you have some ideas for where you want to take things. What is that experience like? What are the kind of the micro signals in the environment between what people are saying or how they're reacting or the energy that you're feeling that you take in as you're going through it, and how do you kind of balance getting, making the jokes that you came in with while also being present to that feedback and adjusting to that? What does that adjustment look like?
Yeah.
So if you could just take us into that, I would be very curious to hear what that picture looks like.
Yeah, I think that my process definitely has changed over time, and I've noticed a lot of change on it very recently in the past months and the past year and whatnot. I used to be very rigid about going up on stage with the exact verbiage I was going to say and very much following a script of the material that I had written, where every single noun, verb, adjective, it was all planned out. And I remember I was doing stand up once and someone came up to me and they said, "That was really good. That was so rehearsed." And it legitimately killed me. And I was like, "Oh my God." I mean, I had lost the balance, of knowing your shit, but also making it seem like you're coming up with it right there and losing that conversational aspect of it. And so now, 5 minutes even to some is a lot of material to do. And, you go to most clubs and comics are doing 10, 15 minutes. So just to distill it down to five, I think that I go up there now and I rehearse my material enough to the point where I'll just go up with a little piece of paper in my pocket of the names of the bits that I'm going to do. And it's then from that I say to myself, okay, I have the map, right? I have this roadmap of the material I'm going to do. I have the map of the set that I'm about to perform. I know the roads of how I'm going to get to each of these bits, right? I know the punchlines and I know some form of a transition I can do, but I feel a little bit more comfortable in myself now to maybe take a detour or two, to maybe be like, all right, I have some freedom to go into the crowd a little bit, to maybe organically come up with something new on stage. And this all obviously comes with time. And, you get more comfortable on stage, obviously, as you continue to perform and do as many minutes as you can and to do as many open mics and whatever as you can. But I think my process now is definitely a lot looser than it used to be. And I think that, especially as a performer, has helped me grow so much because I'm finding these new things that I'm doing every time I get on stage. And it's really interesting. Like when my friends will come to my shows and they know my material so well because they've seen me do it so many times. But then when they come and now they are like seeing me do it in front of different people, they're like, "Oh, like you did this really great new thing on this bit. Like I hadn't seen that before." And I think that those moments are happening way more than they used to. And I think it all feels very good to me as someone who's, still very much trying to find a voice on stage and still trying to really like have my thing, even if that has any meaning. But my process is changing over time. I'm sure it'll change again. I'm excited to see where it goes. I write a lot differently than I used to. I used to be very much like sit at a desk and grind and write material and whatnot. But now I find I do my best writing walking, where I'll go for like a 6 mile walk and then dictate into my phone or write stuff into my little orange pad here. This, you walk around with one of these, like you write stuff in it. And, people definitely think it's suspicious when I'll look at a group of tourists and then write something down and walk away briskly. But, it's all for the purpose of comedy. And they really believe me when I explain that to them. I think that it's cool to observe your own change as a human being, kind of having like points of demarcation where you know that you used to be and seeing where you can go from where you are right now.
Yeah. So Max, I mean, a lot of what you're describing there feels to me like the process of like an apprentice moving to a professional, moving to a master at their craft, right? It's like as you gain more comfort and familiarity with things, then you have that freedom to experiment more and to bring things alive in like different subtle ways. As you're talking, looking at just the practice of stand up, right? Through all these different lenses. It's like, okay, so it's like kind of adjacent to karaoke, right? It's like something people do for fun to like kind of let off steam. Then it's like it's a craft and it's a performance, so you're a performer and you're cultivating that and you're a professional in that way. And then, there's all these elements that go into that aren't just about you being up on stage. So it's you on a 6-mile walk, like making weird faces at people and stuff like that. It's like there's a lot of elements that become this kind of like overall path or professional practice you're undertaking. And then, you touched on it with the therapy component at the top, but like, I'm assuming you talked about like the theater scene, improv, you grew up doing it. It's like, I'm assuming you're doing this because there's also this feeling of like a real inspiration or a calling, So it's like, okay, it's this, we're making jokes, we're at a nightclub and it's about getting strangers to laugh, right? But it's also all this other stuff. Like, it's like this deep, like very deep, probably to the core things that matter to you in the world. And I don't know, I think we're on this show, we're trying to span that. We're trying to kind of illuminate those connections and help people see how interrelated these different aspects of life are. Tend to think about therapy or spirituality or something very meaningful as these kind of cordoned off other sections of life. My question for you is kind of linking back, you heard my little spiel, my story in the intro of like, what do you make of that? It's like, okay, a 13-year-old version of yourself sends you a letter telling you are supposed to be a stand-up comic, or what are you doing? And when I think about it, it's like, you talked about like the terror of stage fright. I totally have that. I mean, it's like, okay, cool. I think about some funny jokes and stuff, but actually getting up and actually pursuing that, getting out to do that and bomb and be in front of strangers and all of that, I'm not certain at all that that's actually going to happen in any way, shape, or form. So I guess my question would be like, how do you get on your journey? How do you get yourself motivated to get up on stage and perform? And then how do you kind of navigate those kind of different aspects of what this experience is for you? Something super crass and easily digested by strangers, and something very deep and profound, I'm imagining, for you inside at the same time.
I think that my journey specifically, it was such an epiphany moment because I was such a shy, introverted person for so long. And then I watched the Saturday Night Live 40th anniversary special when I was 14. And then the next day, actually, right after it ended, I was like, I'm going to do that. Had this great epiphany moment. And then I just started to break out of my shell. And it was such a surprise to so many people because they were like, where's this guy been? But I think I had this incredible self-realization of a path, right? Like, I saw the yellow brick road in a way, and I was like, oh, like I have something that I can follow. And to me, following that thing was like pursuing something that I was genuinely so passionate about. And I think that I'm so blessed to have that, and to have that amazing sense of self-realization, and to have that comfort in doing the thing that I so very much want to do. I think that it's something that I don't really sit back enough and be like, wow, I'm so grateful to have had that happen to me. And I'm also, the very thing that I'm talking about, being so shy and introverted, you don't want to get up in front of people and talk and whatnot. And I just remember the first time doing it and like almost realizing a sense of hidden potential where something that I normally maybe would feel nervous doing, I didn't. And I had such a sense of zen when I walked out on stage. I was 16 the first time I did stand up. And even then, I was like, once you get your footing, I truly was blown away about how in the moment I was and how present I was. And aside from chasing people's laughs and their incredible sense of validation, I was chasing that feeling of knowing exactly where the hell I am in a given moment and being so singularly focused on one thing that all the other shit and mishigas that was going on took a complete backseat. And for however long I was on stage, I was only focused on one thing. And it truly is incredible.
What I feel like you just described there, Max, is a feeling of flow, right? When we talk about
Yes.
that idea where we're
Yes.
so present, that's it. Like what we're doing is what we're doing. We're not thinking about the future. We're not thinking ahead. Maybe some part of you is thinking, hey, how do I get this laugh? What's happening? But it's incredible actually to hear that even in that setting, which most people would describe as very scary, very daunting, a bit of a pressure cooker. Yeah, in the middle of that, you found early on, very early on, you found a sense of zen. And I think if I'm hearing you correctly, that sense of zen was rooted in feeling that you're doing the thing you're meant to be doing, or rooted
Yes.
in, yeah, feeling that you're on the yellow brick road and you're not off the path, whatever that means. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, is that an accurate
That's
characterization?
exactly what it was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And just having a sense of like pride in myself also, knowing that I was doing like this amazing thing that was going to help me so much. Regardless if I got a laugh, I think I was like I'm doing it. Like that's more than a lot of people could say where it's like, "Oh, like I've done it."
Yeah, and that's the piece I'd love to actually explore with you. You said, regardless of what's happening out there, I knew that I would be getting a lot out of it, right? And
Yeah.
and how would you characterize like what it is that you were getting out of it?
I think it's very different. I think it's very conditional depending on whether or not I have a real stinker. Because there have been some times where I've done 10 minutes no laughs, and I get on that F train going home, and I say to myself, I think I should apply for a job at Ernst and Young. All right, I think the full 180's coming, Mom. All right, but then I have this amazing moment sometimes where I'll get no laughs, but I'll be like, it's so interesting how I responded to that. And then I'll do my own sort of self reflection and be like, I took too long of a beat here and I need to move quickly into this next piece of material there. And that's when I start to really go back and, watch film and unpack. I think that's where I really start to learn about my own body language and who I am. And I think watching yourself eat shit on stage is quite humbling. And being on stage and eating shit is even more humbling. And in the bombs is where you really learn about yourself as a performer. Because if you crush all the time, like, what's the fun in that? When you bomb and then you crush, yeah, you feel like you're the shit. You walk a little differently. You're like, I mean, I might be him, you know? I might be ordained by God, and that's after one good joke about your uncle touching you. These are this is just the ego and the id, and that's I mean, stand-up comedians, some they can be quite neurotic, but like taking that moment to yourself to really realize the power of what you had just done is something that I didn't realize I would be doing at all while being a stand-up comedian. But I think that, thank God I started meditating when I was 18 and I'm in therapy and I have all these other things that kind of bleed into it a little bit where I can be like, oh, like let me take some of the teachings from this and apply it to what I'm doing here. And that's where I can really unpack it from so many different angles.
Would you say, Max? I mean, I'm just guessing. Like, you probably don't think of yourself as an overly religious person, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No. I'm at temple twice a year on the high holidays. A lot of it is just for my mother. Listen, I pride myself on being, I was born and raised Jewish. I love it. I love the culture of it. But no, to answer your question, I wouldn't say I'm a highly religious man. I mean, I ate a bacon, egg, and cheese on Passover this year. So I've got a lot of my ancestors.
For our non-yin
Yeah.
audience too, that I got to know everything that means. But no, but I mean, I hear you. I think there's probably a lot of people out there who identify as that. I mean, I'm Jewish too. Within the Jewish world, I think there's plenty of people. Judaism is a little different, obviously, because it's a race, it's a people, and it's a religion. So
Yeah.
maybe you identify as Jewish, but you're not particularly religious. Would you think about? I mean, is stand up your religion? Is this how you connect with God? I mean, it sounded like you became the Messiah after that uncle joke.
Yeah. Well, I think I became damaged after that joke, but that's a really, really powerful statement. I think that it plays with like the meta terminology of like, what is a religion? Is it something that you worship? Because like, yeah, like I bow at the knees of Don Rickles and Gary Shandling and these old guys, and I like worship the words that come out of their mouth. And like, I guess in a sense, it's like a pseudo religion. Yeah, if you're like chasing the coattails of these higher beings and like you want to be them, and like, their words are like psalms, and you hear these stories and they're like Bible verses, and like, yeah, like I guess in a very kind of distant way, like, yeah, maybe it is.
Yeah, and I think you pointed to one side of it, Max, right? Which is, hey, do you have these idols that set standards that you pursue? And I think that's one aspect of
Yeah.
many religions. And then there's the other aspect of religion, which I guess coming from like my faith tradition, right, which is like Hinduism/Buddhism. It's a little bit more rooted in this idea that, hey, like all religions are moving you towards some universal truths about what it means to be and to exist, and kind of what it means to be part of a connected existence, in the universe. And I think what you were describing as far as your practice of being in comedy, and I think what you said, bringing in the lessons that you learned from your own meditation practice or your own inward practice is, hey, like even something like comedy, which on the surface might feel slapstick or whatever, for you as a performer, it's an avenue for you to go inward, to experience yourself, to see how you are in different situations, to notice where your ego is coming in, to where you feel more connected to your deeper essence, and everything in between. And I
Yeah.
think that was getting shades of that from the way you're describing your creative process. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm curious if that speaks to you in a different way around how comedy and the pursuit of this career in a way like a spiritual practice unto itself. And I think when we'd spoken earlier, you used the words of like, hey, it's a conduit for you of self-realization, and it continues to be that. And yeah, I was curious if you can speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think that, not to pat myself on the back, but I mean, I nailed it with that one. It's a conduit of self realization for me. I think that I've learned more about myself in 5 minutes of stage time than an hour of therapy. I think it's the way that I unpack it. It's the fact that I can laugh at it from a different angle than be like, well, how does this relate back to my dad? I think that it's more on its feet for me. And I think that processing it for me is really good to like have something happen and like think about it from different angles. And that's where the comedy might come out of it. Yeah, I think it's an incredible way for me to learn about my own mind, which I haven't even explored most of it. I learn more about myself every day.
If just to kind of continue this like idea or metaphor for a minute, so like, what are the big wisdom teachings then from this religion of Max? What would you say, like, if you had to distill down into some takeaways or points for people? I mean, what have you learned about life and about yourself through doing this that you feel like is valuable and helps you?
The big one for me is that, so my dad is a surgeon, right? And you grow up with someone whose entire job and focus is essentially getting things right the first time. If you bomb in comedy, you don't maim someone. And I think that my biggest thing was understanding the length of the process of becoming good at something. No one is good at something the first time they do it. Very rarely do we see that in any field, whether it be sports or entertainment or whatever. And I think that the biggest lesson I learned, and one that I'm still learning, is that it's all a process, and learning how to slow down and take small breadcrumbs wherever you can get them. And I think focusing on the small wins that'll lead to big gains took so long for me. And I used to only want to do the biggest thing first, and then not getting it would crush me. But then maybe getting something smaller in return. It was a glass half empty kind of mindset. I'm not going to crush every time I get on stage. And I'm not going to do a stand-up set every night where someone's going to be in the crowd and be like, hey, we want to offer you a 3-picture deal at Paramount. That's just not how it works. Instead, having moments where you think, okay, that wasn't good, but what can I take from it for the next time I get up on stage? That'll ultimately lead to these goals that I have as a performer. I think that, understanding your own journey is such a big part of performing and also just life. I think that was like my biggest takeaway of starting out in comedy, and one that like I said, I'm still kind of grappling with to this day, is understanding that it's not all going to happen right now.
Yeah, this lesson that you're speaking to, Max, it's not, it's one thing to know it, and it's another thing to practice it every day, right? And to remind ourselves, and that's where it is a practice. And just this weekend, I was with a friend who, he's in the early stages of having started a company, and he was sharing how he's like, yeah, like going onto LinkedIn can be really destabilizing mentally, because you see all these stories of people who are like, hey, like I started this thing 3 months ago, and it's blown up, and here we are. And it kind of makes you feel at times that, hey, there are these quick hits or quick paths to success. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's true for people, but many more times it's also that, hey, we're not seeing everything that went in even before those 3 months, right? And there's always a larger sort of story at play. And regardless, the thing that you can count on and control is showing up, every day, or at least most days, trying to get better a little bit, all the time. And I kind of want to go even more into the experience of that, beyond even just the concept, and pick on something you said earlier that, hey, some days, you'll bomb, and from it, you'll find a lot of fodder on like what to get better at. And you're relating to that from a place of curiosity, relating to that from a place of a long-term kind of growth mindset. And other times it can be very defeating, right? And it can feel kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, it's a long process. Maybe I'm not built for this. I'm going to go do something else. And that's a oscillation that I know I have felt many, many times, continue to feel all the time. I was surprised to learn at some point, I don't know when, but not that long ago, that even the best of the best, like people who are really at the top of their fields, have their own version of this, where regardless of what they've accomplished, and they're not able to just rest on their laurels, right? And they have their own new frontier, and getting to that frontier is also a process. And so I'm curious if you're able to describe like what makes for that difference when sometimes you're able to relate to it from that growth mindset, sometimes you're not. What is it that you do to, you mentioned slowing down, like what is it that you do to operate from that long-term view to bring yourself there even when you're not there naturally? What does your practice look like to stay in that mindset, and when you're kind of not in that mindset, to bring yourself back?
I mean, most of it is alcohol. I think that no, it's very interesting. I don't. Yeah, listen. We all
Some of it alcohol.
bow at the knee
Yeah.
of the Church of Jack Daniels every now and then. But I don't really know if I have a concrete answer. I think that maybe my mindset is tomorrow is a new day. I think that for a while, maybe this still happens sometimes. I think certainly less than it did, but sometimes I would soak in a bomb for like a few days and really be feeling it and have it be affecting me and not understanding that tomorrow is a new day and it's a clean slate. And I think that when you watch people do comedy after you bomb, they make it look so easy and you're like, "Oh, like I can never do that." So maybe just unplugging from the world. Call a friend, call your mom. My mom usually laughs at what I say. Sometimes she'll pick at the literal aspect of my humor. And be like, well, that wouldn't happen. And I'll be like, well, I guess we'll cut this short. Yeah. Like I'm doing conceptual stuff about Honda Civics. And she's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to call my dad now. So um, just kind of, having other outlets for your own happiness, I guess, if that makes any sense. Like having things that you can take comfort in. Putting on a record, sitting in your apartment, finding ways to chill, being content with yourself. I think that that's something that I'm also very blessed to be. I can be alone and I can be okay with being alone. And I think that in a way, maybe that's helped me a lot with performing because I can be kind of chill and zen after and before. Well, before kind of, but I can just kind of unplug it all. And again, tomorrow is a new day. And hitting the reset button every night and being like, all right, well, let's earn another good day tomorrow. John Cena actually had a really good quote where he says, like, every day I feel like I have to
Mhm.
earn a sunset. Where it's like, can you truly watch a good sunset if you haven't done enough in the day to like make you sit back and appreciate this moment of peace? So just making sure that I'm doing enough to appreciate the moments where I can truly unplug and be like, all right, it's good to unwind.
Well, when you're sharing all that, Max, I feel like,
Yeah.
I mean, it really just strikes me that you need a lot of resiliency and grit to be in like this field or to be, really kind of any kind of performer. But that's something that people really struggle with is, finding that. So it sounds like you kind of have that kind of natural inclination or that resource where you can kind of wipe the slate clean and
Yeah.
yeah, like kind of turn the page, let the next day be a new day, kind of take things in stride, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I can just imagine like, I mean, what I think would be devastating to a lot of people, myself included, getting up and this whole scenario we've been talking about of bombing. I feel like most people would take that as like, maybe a lot of us would get over it eventually, but it would be very difficult. You'd be saying, I suck at this. It's just too much. Like, it's just like this whole kind of character assessment of yourself rather than seeing it as a craft, as something that you can practice and get better at. I think you spoke to kind of how you do that, but do you have any advice for people who struggle with that a little bit more? Like, if you meet a comic who's less experienced than you or up and coming or having a hard time with that, yeah, okay, like go chill out, go watch a movie, do your thing. But what do people need to remember when they're making that, I guess, error in their thought? It's kind of like this emotional response where, because what happens there is then the show's over, right? That, oh, I bombed, it's done. I'm not in a process the way you are. I'm not on a yellow brick road. I tried that once or twice. I sucked at it. And now I don't do that anymore.
I think knowing that everyone has bombed, that definitely helps. Like every comedian that's ever performed has bombed. Like you can say that you just did the same thing that Dave Chappelle did, that Chris Rock did. Everyone starts off bombing and performing like shit. And it's a shared experience that all comics have. And I think if you see it for its positive aspects, where, all right, I bombed, but like that's kind of where I'll learn who I am as a performer. That's when you can really understand, like, oh, yeah, the show didn't go well, which is negative. But there's actually this great other side of the pillow, which is where this bad thing that no one wants to happen when you walk on stage is going to really be informative of who you are as a performer and as a human being.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you're in the company of greatness amidst your devastation.
You and Jerry Seinfeld can sit and talk about that time you bombed. Bingo. Every comic has a good bomb story. Everyone's got one.
And just as a follow up to that, I mean, like,
Yeah.
just getting people inspired to take the leap. You kind of got into that space
Yeah.
where you felt calm. You found yourself calm in the midst of it. What can people utilize to get motivated, to basically have enough motivation to overcome that terror of what's worse than death, right? Like being on that stage and facing people and facing the music.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm the one to be like, just get up and do it, because I also am, like I have friends that work in finance and whatnot, and I'll go and I'll hang out with their friends that are in finance, and they're like, yeah, like I've always kind of thought about doing it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so just do it. Just do it. Like the worst that can happen is that you bomb. It's not that deep. It is what it is. You just got to go up and do it. So maybe just having an understanding that if you bomb, no one's going to die. There isn't going to be serious catastrophe. I think once you understand that, maybe you'll be a little bit more open to doing it.
Yeah, there's this tactic, and I think I want to say it's called like fear setting or something. This idea of like take a scenario that you're about to enter, imagine the worst couple of options in terms of the outcomes, and then like really connect with what would it feel like to be there, and like what are the implications. And level one of that exercise is like normally when you lay out what would happen, it's not that bad, right? It's like, okay, if I go, I
Exactly.
bomb in front of a group of people I don't know. Okay, it's going to
Yeah.
feel kind of shitty, but like really not a
Yeah.
big
Like a
deal.
pulmonary embolism is not going to be on
Right.
that list.
Right.
Like you're going to be fine. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the second part of it is like, okay, what can you do to like mitigate that outcome just so you can
Yeah.
feel good about going into it? And again, knowing full well that it might be that outcome and that you'll be fine if that happens.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to stay with this idea of bombing for a second, because one of the concepts that came into my field or re-entered my field recently that I've been trying to practice, it's been a little bit more top of mind, is this idea that like, hey, when we're in a dissonant state and we feel off and we feel disconnected, and I imagine that's what it can feel like for many people when they bomb, right? There's actually also a value to just like staying there. You talked about it as, hey, sometimes you immediately jump into tomorrow's another day, and other times you're actually stuck there for a little bit longer. And I think our tendency is to kind of want to just like move forward, right? Brush over that feeling, maybe even the act of like, okay, let me study this, let me extract the learning from it, is a form of like getting out of that feeling of dissonance, of negativity, so to speak, around it. And again, there's this idea that, hey, maybe you just stay in the negativity for a while, let it just naturally transmute, and while you're there, you might actually learn things that your like active learning sensibility isn't going to point you to. It's more like your intuition will help you connect with, well, why am I feeling this way about it, right? What's behind it? What was so important to me that got shattered that I'm now feeling this way? What is this feeling about? What is this feeling telling me? What would it look like for me to be okay with this feeling, to not even label this feeling as bad or as shitty, and just to accept it? And there are all these different ways we can relate to that dissonant state. And I'm curious if any of that resonates with you. Like, have you, in those periods where post bombing, where you were just low and you were just, drained by it, were there times when you're like, hey, like, I'm glad I didn't just move out of it right away? I'm glad that I allowed myself to stay in it. And
Yeah.
if so, like, what came out of that for you?
That's a really good point to bring up. And I think that if I were so nonchalant about it, it would be a little bit psychotic, but maybe just basking in the shittiness of it for just like a little bit, dipping a toe in it, is where maybe I've thought about ways to improve a little bit more. I remember I had a show that I did in Bushwick, and I brought a lot of friends to it. And I had a fine set. I didn't think I did bad by any means, but there were moments on stage where I felt a little elementary. And I was pretty low after the show because, like you bring your friends, you want to do well. And they were all like, oh, like you did great, but my ass. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to pity me. But I took a moment where like I was up for a while that night and I just journaled about it and I wrote like 16 pages of just being like, I feel so shitty about certain things that I did on stage tonight. I want to get better. How am I going to get better at it? And if I had just taken my friend's word for it, where they said, oh, you did good. And I was like, all right, well, if they said I did good, then that's that. Then how am I going to get any better? And I'm not saying to only focus on the things that didn't go well, because there were points in the show where I was like, wow, like this was so much fun and this worked so well. And I also made sure to note those, but there also were moments where I was like, this needs to change, not just so that I can get better, but so that I feel better about who I am presenting myself in front of these random people.
I feel like so much what you're talking about, Max, it's like on the one hand, it's about not taking yourself so seriously. I think we think about that with comics. How do you get up on stage? Well, you don't give a heck. You don't give a fuck about who you are and how you're showing up. And if you bomb, you roll off your back, like you get up, you keep going. And that's like I think that's very empowering way to live, and I think you're talking about your friends and finance, and it's like wanting to get up there, but it's like the reason we don't is because we have a fragile ego, right? We're scared that, bomb is going to destroy us somehow. And so then we stay kind of confined in our lane, not taking yourself so seriously. And then at the same time, though, I hear in everything you're sharing, like how serious of a craft this is, like how serious you are about it. You're up till, you're up in the middle of the night writing pages and pages, like processing all this stuff. And so I'm curious if you could speak to that. Like, I'm kind of, what got me thinking about this is like our little religion conversation before. And I was like, well, that's really the problem with religion is everyone takes it so seriously. It's like, so no one likes it. So it's like, everyone's so, I'm a priest now, I'm a rabbi, I got this text, like whatever. But we take ourselves so seriously. When I think about like kind of the religion of Max that I'm learning about here, it's like, you can't do that. You have to not take yourself so seriously. And at the same time, be very dedicated and passionate about it. So can you comment on that? Like, how do you walk that line? Does it resonate for you? And how do you be serious and not serious at the same time?
It's something I haven't even really thought about. And I think it's such a crazy thing to bring up because I think that maybe the unseriousness of it is the self-deprecating aspect of being able to laugh at myself and like doing material about how often I get confused for a woman from behind. Like that, like being able to laugh at yourself and being like, guys, like I get it. Like I look like an 80s gym teacher. Like it's okay. We can all laugh about it. Let's all have a moment. But then understanding like, oh, but this is also like an art form. And like you can be funny looking and you can be funny, but that doesn't mean you'll be a good comedian. And so everything has to be presented well. And that's where the real work comes in. Because if you know you can do it, then putting in the work is what the most important thing is. Because, anyone can cut their hair like this and like kind of have like a silly, light take on things. But like, if you don't present it well, then no one's going to buy into it. It's comedy is essentially like you're selling your thoughts, like I said before. It's like you're selling these funny ideas you had, and every show is a sales pitch, and when they laugh they buy your product. And so you can either write a Ford Taurus of a joke, sorry Ford, or you can write a Ferrari. Actually, no, I'm not going to say sorry, Ford, because Henry Ford hated Jews. So, yeah, I want you to think of every bomb as a Ford Taurus or a Ford Fusion. My brother drove a Ford Fusion. That car was a piece of shit. I'll say it. Sorry, Sam. That car was an automatic transmission, but it shifted like a manual. And let me tell you, I think I got sciatica from driving it. It truly was unbelievable.
Are you a younger brother?
I'm a middle child. So maybe all of this distills to the fact that I am just so damaged from being overlooked.
Actually, so I'm a middle child too, and we actually had an episode now a couple years ago with this guy Barry who was talking about birth order and the way that birth order, affects what people tend to do. There tend to be a lot more comedians and actors as younger siblings. Older siblings tend to be the ones in the military and in the C-suite. And it's just kind of like the way that family dynamics kind of tend to shake out. So I'm kind of curious about that because, like, I think the younger sibling usually gets to be like the joker, or like the parents are softened up, so it's like kind of like funny. But how has being a middle child formed you into being a damaged comedian?
Well, I am just starving for people's attention.
That was going to be my guess. I was like, that is always the one liner on the middle child, right? Like, needs attention.
Yeah. I am just hungry for looks, listen, like, my younger brother is really funny, really, really funny. And everyone thought that he was really funny for a while. And I'm not saying that people don't think he's unfunny, but then I kind of came out of my shell and I was like, hey, like, I'm also kind of fun. And people were like, yes, you are. And he was like, oh, but I still am. And now we have this great kind of like comedy team dynamic. But I think that had I followed that traditional route, I don't even know what I would be, because I feel like there were so many times where I did feel kind of overlooked, but I also had a great childhood and I love my parents and I had a great time. But there were times where I was like, why do my parents only care about my older brother and how funny my younger brother is and how he's so cute and cherubic? It's like, oh, but like I also have fun things going on. And they're like, yeah, but have you seen those cheeks? Come on. And I'm like, you know what? Fine, sure. So maybe this is like a cry for help in a really
this sounds like a strange way. A bit, and you can therapize this on stage and see if it feels right to you.
I got a Daniel Day-Lewis my left foot thing going on down here where I'm writing material on that pad. I swear. Yeah, I'm painting
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I feel like what this speaks to is just how like we do bring all of ourselves, right, and all of our stories into the choices that we make. And on the one hand, yeah, there was that epiphany that you had, right, watching SNL, that moment of inspiration that was, that's stuck with you. It's had this, lasting effect and seems to be a part of the foundation of what you're doing. On the other hand, there are all these other forces, right, that probably went into why you do it, the way that you do it, what your angle is, how even that you're relating to it as a medium for self-realization and growth, and all of the above. Yeah, it's been great, Max, just to dig into all this with you. I'll kind of pause. I don't have a question at this time. I think I'm just digesting, but also feeling kind of a sense of completion at the moment from my end. But I'll turn it over to you, Gabe. Curious if you have other kind of thoughts or feelings that you haven't gotten across yet.
No, for sure. Max, I really appreciate it, man. It's been really fun chatting with you. And I'm excited to kind of follow. I'm curious to see if any of these, our conversation ends up in your material. And that kind of leads me to that leads me to my last question, which is around material. Okay. So you talked before about, okay, I'll go for a 6-mile walk and I just I'll start writing down jokes, or just right now you're saying like, I'm writing things right now. So it's like, you can kind of see, I think that's what's great about comedy. You start to see like, there's lots of material out there. There's so many different situations, or really anything could become potentially a topic for you. But again, within this kind of whole religion metaphor, it's like, it's almost like, the way you're talking about before, it's like the laugh is like the validation. The joke is like the word of God in a certain way, or maybe them laughing at you is the word of God. But it's like there's some kind of like inspiration element, it seems to me, like in any creative process, but I feel like it's comes through in this too, where you're like, I mean, it's a bit of a mystery. It's like, well, where did it come from? Where the heck did that joke come from? You know, I mean, it's like we can take personal credit and be like, yeah, well, because I'm a clever guy or because I'm funny. You know, it's like, but also it's like kind of something I think that's beyond us too, that we kind of figure out ways to tap into. And so I was just curious, like, if you could take us a little bit into your process, your creative process. Like, how do you hear jokes? How do you connect with them? We've talked about how you kind of respond or reflect on what the audience is giving you and you learn from that. But like, where does the material come from, and how do you pick that out? Where you're just like, oh, that's fucking funny, I'm putting that together into a set.
Yeah, honestly, like it comes from so many different sources that it's almost hard to explain the way that like I can hear something and then be like, oh, like I know that's funny. Sometimes that does happen where it's like that something about this is so inherently funny that it will make its way on stage. And other times it's conversational. Like I've done material and I've had people see it and they'll be like, is this about me? And I'm like, yes. Yeah. Or like,
a caricature of this show is gonna be up on stage, right? It's just like,
yeah,
wait a minute, what?
Yeah. Or like, I'll like sprinkle a line into a sentence and then I'll do it on stage and like I'll bring one of my friends and they'll be like, did you say that to me 4 days ago? And I'm like, yeah, I did. But yeah, I feel like a huge part of writing material is having an open mind and like always looking for it in a way of being like, there's something funny about all of this. And like Jerry Seinfeld has really good points about this where he's like, I'm always writing material. Having the ability to always be on the lookout for something, being able to put a creative spin on almost anything.
Yeah, what I feel like you're speaking to, Max, is
but
like,
how do you notice it?
Yeah, I was gonna ask
how
that
do
too.
I notice
like,
it?
there's a level of like, yes, you're training your eye and your ear and your perceptiveness, and that's a sensibility that you've probably been tuning for the last 6 years, and it keeps getting better. But then there's also this feeling, and I feel like I have these moments where I feel tapped into my own sense of creativity, and just like ideas are just like coming out, or I relate to something that's being said on like multiple planes or levels. And I think, the term that sometimes comes into mind for me is like, oh, there is something that is like divine inspiration, or there is something that is like, when we call it intuition, right? You're like, yeah, I intuitively just knew something would be funny. It's like, is that pattern recognition, or is that like something more inexplicable? And I guess to your point earlier, it's like, yeah, maybe it's inexplicable, but curious what you think.
There are some things that are so in your face that it's like, okay, this is funny. You see a dude wearing a bad hairpiece, immediately you're like, that's funny. That's funny. But then the subliminal stuff where, going back to like growing up as a middle child, like maybe almost not taking it so seriously and seeing it like, oh, but like there's something funny about this. I don't know, like it's hard to explain the way that like, because again, everyone has a different way of writing material and coming up with material. Sometimes I'll like, if I'm walking and like, I'll unplug the headphones and I'll like hear what people say. Like maybe that could do something. I'll watch TV. Something could come up from that. So I think, and I don't even know if I'm answering your question. I could just sound like I'm rambling, but it
makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. I hear you saying, like with your middle child thing, right? It's like, well, that's like a painful thing that people can be in therapy for years, and then
which I am,
which you are, also, right? But like the most painful shit's also funny, and like that's what I love about comedy and humor in general. It's like, well, it just helps you take a step back and see it from a different perspective. And it's like you mentioned, being on stage is like being in therapy. It's like, okay, you're getting that validation from people, and so that helps. But it's also, I feel like it just kind of puts our problems in perspective. Like if I take like the worst crap going on in my life and I turn that into a bunch of jokes where I'm laughing at myself about it, that's therapeutic, you know? I
Exactly.
mean, as long as you're doing that in the right way, you know, where you're not piling on. But it's like when you can really laugh about it, it takes a lot of the heaviness and the sting out of it, you know. And so many of us are walking around with big heavy backpacks, and I think humor is like a possible invitation into seeing the very same content, the same material, but in a way that is enlivening and uplifting and relieving, freeing.
One of the applications of that whole idea, Gabe, that I've been working on, is I think I have a tendency to like take some parts of myself too seriously, or like some of my patterns, or like if I don't do something that I feel like I wish I'd done, I'll like get down on myself on it, right? And the part that I've been kind of enjoying starting to practice is not even the thing, that the pattern itself, but it's like, oh, there's that part of me again, haha, just kind of laughing at like that tendency of mine that previously I was judging or like had a very like harsh relationship with. Instead, it's kind of just like relating to it in a much more uh, light way, and introducing that levity into my own like internal systems has been has also been very transformative. When we talk about the spiritual practice of comedy, I think like channeling it inwards in that way, is something that holds a lot of potential as well.
All right, Max, I'll kick it to you for a final word. Anything you want to say, or tell us a joke, or both.
Oy vey. Something I yeah, now is when I'll plug my Scientology, thrust my beliefs onto people. No, yeah, I appreciate you guys giving me an outlet to not just kind of like be like, oh, like tell us a funny story about when you bombed, but also to be like, no, but like explain how your mind works and like explain things. Cause I think I also just want to say, like, I'm by no means successful in industry standards and I'm still very much up and coming. I am very up and coming. And I think accepting that, like, oh, yeah, like I am a comedian, and you guys being like, tell us about it, and treating it as if it's like, again, like you said, like a religion. I think that is so helpful to me in my own journey, and to like bask in the sense of like, yeah, like I'm doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and with that being said, here's a lesbian joke. No.
Well,
No, yeah.
happy to stroke your ego, and validate you a little bit, because I do think that you deserve that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and just thank you for sharing your journey and for peeling back the curtain, right, on what it's like to be in the middle of that. And I think, you might hear this story where you said someone successful by industry standards, right? You get to that stage and it's reflective, and I think it's or retrospective rather. And I think it's great to drop into to where you're
Yeah.
at, wherever that might be. And thank you for just being so open about it.
It will
Had a good
be
time.
it'll be interesting to revisit this as you blow up. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm happy this will be my cancelable podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
But did you
Listen,
hear
we're all
that podcast he did on Woven Wings Live? This guy, get him out of here.
Max Wiener, straight white comic, and I haven't even plugged Rhino boner pills yet, which I mean, I'm surprised. You get a white dude in front of a mic, he's gonna say some shit. Okay, so, but yeah, had a great time, boys. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Max. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us. And I look forward to just checking out more of your work, and maybe sending you a link to a bomb video of my own once I'm there in Maui. Let's see if I can get there from this.
You gotta do it, man.
Let's see.
You gotta
Yeah,
do
I mean,
it.
after this conversation, I think I do. We'll see. I might have to reach out to you for some, extra push or something. Whatever,
Yeah.
your version of get up and do it. whatever form that takes.
I can do that.
But
Yeah.
all right, okay, good. I need that. So thanks for bumping me up today. Folks listening, thanks so much for tuning in with our show today. Again, please, you can follow us. You can subscribe to our newsletter. You can follow us on YouTube. You can check out Max's work. Max is a Wiener on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I'm sure that's where you're posting, Max, about shows and things you're doing.
Yeah.
You're based in the New York City area. So if you're around there, look for Max on the comedy circuit, I'm assuming. We will continue to bring you new episodes in the new year. This is our last episode of 2024. Rahul, congrats on us completing this third season. And thanks all y'all out there for tuning in and listening and being part of the journey. We will be back in the new year with a new season and some more great interviews with folks doing great work in the world. In the meantime, take care out there, be well, and we will see you next time.